Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Jill Weisenberger, who's here to share with us her new book, Prediabetes, a complete guide, second edition, your lifestyle reset to stop prediabetes and other chronic illnesses. So are you concerned that you may have prediabetes and you're not really sure what to do? Well, today's show is going to uncover just that. So Jill Weisenberger is an internationally recognized nutrition, diabetes, and prediabetes expert. Through coaching, speaking, and working with the media, Jill empowers people to grab control of their health, one lifestyle habit at a time. Jill is a consultant and spokesperson for the food industry, as well as a panelist for the U.S. News and World Report Best Diet Rankings. She contributes to a variety of magazines and websites, including Today's Dietitian. So let's welcome to the show, Jill Weisenberger.
Hi, thanks.
What an honor it is to have you here to talk about this book. I understand this is a second edition. Can you tell us about just this journey? Because my goodness, I know it's such a great book. So many people are loving this book. What inspired you to redo this book and bring the second edition to life?
Okay, it's Prediabetes, a complete guide. And the subtitle is Your Lifestyle Reset to Stop Prediabetes and Other Chronic Illnesses. The first edition of this book did very, very well. I got wonderful feedback, lots of sales. It was a very successful book. And unfortunately, the publisher had to close down what they were doing. It was the American Diabetes Association. And during COVID, they closed down all of their consumer book publishing. And they started to publish only professional books like textbooks and other healthcare professional books. So it was really left to me to find another publisher. And it was great. It was a wonderful experience. I found an agent. I'd never worked with an agent. I found an agent. She found me some publishers who were interested, and I interviewed with them and took what I think was the best fit for me.
And here we are today. So when we talk about prediabetes, so what is that? Because I think there's a lot of confusion around that.
Sure. So prediabetes, by definition, is when blood sugar levels are higher than normal, but below the level of diabetes. So that's what it is, just by definition. What you'll get a blood sugar draw at a doctor's office or a lab, and that's how they would diagnose somebody with prediabetes. But it's really more than just that. It's not just a blood sugar problem. It's a whole metabolic problem, affecting the liver and affecting blood pressure and cholesterol levels, triglyceride levels, and a whole host of things, just inflammation, that type of thing. So I think a couple of things happen. We hear the word pre-diabetes. So we think, okay, it's pre-problem, but I've got to tell you, it is not pre-problem. Quite a number of people with prediabetes have the same complications that we see in people with type 2 diabetes. So that's one problem. The other thing is that when you hear prediabetes, it sounds like just a blood sugar issue, but it's not. It really is a more systemic, full body metabolic problem.
So when we talk about it being a full body metabolic problem and you talked about the liver and inflammation, what does that really mean? Is there just more going on that we need to discover?
What it means is that we have to tend to the full body instead of just the blood sugar. So I think a lot of times people want to have that myopic focus where they're just looking at one thing. Maybe it's weight, maybe it's cholesterol. In this case, it's blood sugar. And they want to look at just that one thing. Okay, if I stop eating this and this and this and this, my blood sugar will go down. But it doesn't solve the rest of the problem. So we can get a lower blood sugar level, but it still doesn't solve that entire metabolic problem. So people really have to tend to their entire body, what is good for all of their cells, not just the blood sugar.
Do most people realize that they have prediabetes?
No. Oh my goodness. No. Close to 40% of American adults, I think it's 38% of American adults have prediabetes, and just a small fraction, maybe a fifth of them know that they have it. So to me, those are the lucky people, because it's an alarm bell saying, hey, it's time to do something. Wake up, do something about this now before it gets worse. And the people who don't know about it because they haven't been to the doctor, or they haven't had blood work done, or they just didn't, notice when their doctor was talking to them, they're the ones who don't know to make the change. And the thing of it is, when it comes to prediabetes, the sooner you make the change, the more likely you are to have a reversal. And also the more likely you are then not to develop type 2 diabetes.
Well, that's very encouraging news. In your
Mm-hmm.
book, you talk about the stats, and I was floored by them. Just how many Americans have this and don't know. My goodness. I-
96 million, I think, is the last number I heard.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That is such a huge number. So how do people determine whether or not they fall within those categories, let's say before they go see their doctor? What are some of the warning signs?
There are zero warning signs. This is part of the problem. It's just silent. People will sometimes have type 2 diabetes for years before they're diagnosed. Often, when I used to work in the hospital setting, so often people would get diagnosed with diabetes when they came in with complications of diabetes, suggesting, based on their complications, that they had had diabetes for several years. So there really aren't any symptoms of prediabetes. The earlier signs of type 2 diabetes, now keep in mind that prediabetes is pre-type 2 diabetes. And the signs for that are increased thirst, increased urination. Sometimes somebody might lose a couple of pounds, fatigue. But, these can be signs of a lot of things. So I think what happens sometimes is people just start feeling kind of meh, and they get used to feeling kind of meh. So many times I've heard people say something along the lines of, I didn't know how lousy I felt till I started to feel better. Once they took control of their diet and their sleep and their exercise and stress levels and all those things, they're just amazed that they could feel as great as they felt.
Well, that's encouraging. That's
Yes.
definitely encouraging. And, it's interesting. I've heard a lot of people talk about, well, I had COVID and I'm so exhausted now. So and maybe we're blaming things that could be other things. We never really know.
Right. That's why we have doctor's visits on a regular basis. And that's why there's screenings for all kinds of things. And a blood sugar screening is common beginning at like age 35.
And those are the type of tests that they'll get at their doctor's office.
Yes. So there's a couple of different tests. So you might go in and have a fasting blood sugar. So that's, maybe they'll take it out of your arm, or sometimes even just out of your finger, to get a screening. Out of the finger would just be a screening to see what your blood sugar level is. And so that's a blood sugar picture of that moment. And then there's another test called the hemoglobin A1C, or sometimes just called A1C, always taken out of the arm, never out of the finger, or rarely out of the finger, I should say. And that gives us a bigger picture. It tells us what your average blood sugar has been over the last 2 to 3 months. And either one of those being elevated is diagnostic for prediabetes, or if it hits a certain level, it's diagnostic for diabetes. But it's either one of those. And so typically, if you have an abnormal blood sugar level, you would get a second test done. And it could be the same, either the fasting blood sugar level, or it could be the A1C again, or the other one. It doesn't matter.
Can someone have a normal blood sugar level and still be, at risk?
It's possible to go in and have a normal fasting blood sugar and still have an elevated A1C. It's also possible to have it the reverse, where your A1C is in the normal range, but your fasting blood sugar is elevated. And there's a couple of reasons for this, but the primary reason is the A1C is a picture of your average blood sugar. So that's going to be all those times after you've eaten, in addition to when you're sleeping and fasting. But the fasting is just a picture of one, just one snapshot. So sometimes people might have a high fasting blood sugar, but they have maybe normal blood sugars after meals. So maybe their A1C won't be in the elevated range. Or it could be the other way around. People have normal fasting, but their after meal blood sugars are elevated. So that would give them a higher A1C. So that's why we're going to miss people when we screen either way. My personal preference is to screen with, both.
In your book, you talk about that there are some signals that we might be at higher risk. You talk about overweight and obesity, and there's others as well. And I was surprised how many of these, I think a lot of people either fall within that category, or I've heard people say, well, I've gained weight and I can't seem to lose it. It's interesting to hear and then to see what you have in your book as well, what some of these signals might be.
Sure. So elevated triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol, high blood pressure, fatty liver disease, obesity, these are all possible signs of prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. They're basically, they often come together. They cluster together. So if you have high triglycerides and low HDL, there's a very, very good chance that you also have high blood sugar.
In your book, you talk about insulin resistance, and I've heard about that a lot. And I think we're hearing a lot about it. People are talking about, well, you take this pill or that pill, and that will help with that. What is insulin resistance, and what way should we be looking at this?
Well, insulin resistance is when certain cells of the body don't respond to insulin very well. So we're looking at the liver, the muscle, and the fat. Can be other cells as well, but those are the primary ones, of the top three that we have concerns with. And so if insulin is the hormone that helps the body use insulin. Insulin is the hormone that helps the body use blood sugar properly. So with the way insulin works is after you eat, your blood sugar goes up. Insulin also comes up, and it just basically is the key that unlocks the cells to allow sugar to go out of the blood and into the cells. So it unlocks the door so the sugar can be transported to where it needs to go. But if you are insulin resistant, meaning the cells don't respond properly to insulin, well, the blood sugar is going to go up because it's not able to get into the cells properly. So there's an abundance of sugar in the blood and too little in the cells. So that's what insulin resistance means. But there are other aspects of insulin resistance that will affect triglycerides and affect blood pressure and affect cholesterol, because insulin has more than just one role. We always think about insulin as just being the blood sugar hormone, but it has other roles as well. So often somebody will have insulin resistance, but they'll have normal blood sugar levels because it just hasn't gotten to the point of prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. Insulin resistance probably happens a couple of years before somebody gets to the prediabetes stage. So prediabetes is when our blood sugar just goes above that threshold that says not normal any longer, not in the healthy range. But for a long time prior to that, you were still insulin resistant. Somebody was still insulin resistant, but the body put out enough insulin. So it was like extra insulin to make up for the lack of efficiency. Sometimes I think about it like this. If a baby cries and the mom doesn't come or the dad doesn't come, the baby cries louder. Or if I knock on the door and you don't answer, I'm going to knock louder. It's like that. The sugar doesn't go into the cells, so the pancreas sends out extra insulin to kind of make it a louder message.
And then it throws everything out of whack.
It does. And then at some point, your body can't make enough insulin anymore. It puts out everything it's got, but it isn't enough to push those blood sugar levels down. So that's when blood sugar rises to the level of prediabetes. And it's a progressive problem. The pancreas gets more and more inefficient, puts out less and less insulin. So blood sugar levels run higher and higher. So that's how we go from first insulin resistance with normal blood sugar levels to prediabetes, to type 2 diabetes, and to then what we would say is long-term type 2 diabetes, where somebody has used up all, way too much of their insulin producing abilities. And then they would also need insulin injections or insulin pump or something like that to help them.
So is there a way that we can make some lifestyle interventions then?
It's all about lifestyle interventions. That's what prediabetes, a complete guide is about. That's what my life is about, I think, There's so much we can do. Sometimes people will say, oh, it's a lifestyle disease. I take exception to that. It is not a lifestyle disease, but it is a health problem that has lifestyle solutions. So cleaning up the diet makes a big, big difference. Getting regular exercise is so critical. Just healthy eating, healthy lifestyle. The thing of it is that it's not something mysterious. It's really just good, healthy eating. Variety of foods, more plants than animals, daily exercise, regular strength training, movement throughout the day, adequate sleep. These are the most important things. And they're things that we all want to do anyway.
I was real encouraged when I read in your book that even 10 years after the start of the study, the people that used the lifestyle intervention changes had a lower risk that was like by 34%, something like that. I mean,
That's right.
How encouraging is that?
It's fabulous because lifestyle makes a really big difference. And here's the other thing. So often the people I know and the people I work with start to feel guilty or, they beat themselves up because they can't sustain all the changes. But it doesn't take really strict behaviors in order to see a big difference. So just as an example, if somebody's drinking a lot of sodas and they stop drinking sodas, or if they're, just not eating vegetables and eating extra starches and meats and they start eating more vegetables and less starches and meats, those are minor things that over time are going to make a really, really big difference. And the other thing is that sometimes people will lose weight if they have weight to lose. Not everybody with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes has any extra weight to lose, certainly not. But so if people do lose weight because they need to, it's healthier for them, or if they get their blood sugar under control, even if those things are only temporary, the long-term benefits are still there. They are large. So there shouldn't be any beating yourself up because you gained back some of the weight you lost, or because the things that you were doing to lower your blood sugar level don't work as well anymore. What you have achieved will make a big difference in all the years to come.
Does stress and our like negative thoughts, does that also take a toll on us as we are working through this process?
Well, negative thoughts, if they get really severe, if there's shame involved, I think that's really a problem. I think sometimes, negative emotions and negative thoughts have an advantage because they help us to recognize where we want to make changes and do better. But when we get to the point of shame, I don't think that helps anybody. I think it's self-defeating. It's self-sabotaging. It makes everything so much harder. But the other thing is that it's not as black and white as a lot of people want to or a lot of people think that it is. just because you ate a piece of birthday cake today doesn't mean you're never going to lose weight or you're never going to get your blood sugar in control. It doesn't negate the 10,000 really good things that you've already done for yourself. And so what I see happen so often is that people will say, oh, I ate a piece of birthday cake, or I was going to stop at one cookie, but I had four, whatever, something like that. And they just feel horrible about themselves. So they end up on a downward spiral, making things harder on themselves than if they just said, oops, I messed up. I'm doing better now. Because every time you eat is an opportunity to do well. Every time. And there isn't anything about perfect. It's kind of a silly notion. And when people will sometimes say things like, I messed up today, so I'll start fresh tomorrow, or I messed up today, I'll start fresh on Monday. I think that is very self-sabotaging. So I messed up. Okay, I'm human. I messed up like everybody else in this universe. And now it's time for me to take a lesson from that and brush myself off, pick myself up, and eat healthy at the next meal.
I like that. There's no guilt and shame involved in that. And
There shouldn't be.
yeah, I could just kind of keep moving forward.
It's a big aha moment for a lot of the people who read Prediabetes, A Complete Guide, and a lot of the people that I work with. That's one of the things that I hear the most from people is that they stop beating themselves up, and that really helps them move forward.
What are some ways that people can boost their insulin sensitivity?
Well, every single time you exercise, you boost your insulin sensitivity. So even if you exercise one time in your whole life, that one time was beneficial for at least a little while. But let's just think of a few things. Most commonly, when people think of exercise, they think about like walking, jogging, or other aerobic activities. Really, really important. That does boost insulin sensitivity. And it can do so for even a couple of days, depending on how long you exercise and the intensity of your exercise. So I want people to do that every day that they possibly can. And if they are struggling with after meal high blood sugars, then taking a walk after a meal is a really good way to bring the blood sugar levels down. So that's one way to boost insulin sensitivity. Also with exercise is strength training. And I get a lot of pushback, especially from women who don't want to strength train. They find it boring for some reason. I hear that more often about strength training than I do about aerobic exercise. But it boosts insulin sensitivity at least as well as aerobic exercise or cardiovascular exercise. And the thing of it is that it's additive. So doing one, either strength training or cardiovascular exercise is good for you, but doing both is doubly good for you. And then there's another thing about strength training that's really good is, as we get older, we lose muscle mass. We do not want to lose muscle mass as we age. We want to rail against that as much as we can, do everything we can to prevent that. Strength training is one of those things. And when you have more muscle, you have more place for blood sugar to go after a meal. So after eating, the preferred place for blood sugar to go is muscle. But if you have a teeny tiny bit of muscle, then there's less place for your blood sugar to go. So I try to explain it this way. I think it helps people visualize and understand the concept. If I have a little bucket and a giant bucket in the backyard during a rainstorm, the bigger bucket is obviously going to collect more rain. So it's the same thing. If I have a little muscle or a big muscle, the big muscle can collect more blood sugar. So that's a second reason that resistance training is so important. And also being just active throughout the day. The American Diabetes Association suggests that we get up, if we're having like long periods, long stretches of just sitting, they suggest that we get up every 30 minutes for a couple of minutes each time, 2-3 minutes, doing simple things, walking to the bathroom, getting a drink of water, doing toe raises, knee raises, squats, push-ups against the wall, stretching, any of those things, that also will improve insulin sensitivity. So there's 3 ways just with exercise. But sleep is important. When we don't sleep well, we lose insulin sensitivity. If we don't sleep deeply enough, and if we don't sleep long enough. And then food is another thing. Very, very high fat diets will make us less insulin sensitive or make us more insulin resistant. Having the right types of fibers that help our gut bacteria, the healthy gut bacteria, thrive and produce the compounds that are beneficial to us, that will also increase insulin sensitivity. So we can come at it from a lot of different directions.
Let's say someone needs a sense of accountability. How would they go about doing that?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways, and it's going to be different for different people. I like accountability, but I like to be accountable to myself. So I will use things like habit trackers or some other sort of a progress tracker. That's very useful to me. Other people need groups or people. There are apps for that. I have courses that people with prediabetes can join, and that often is very helpful because they are either accountable to me or they're accountable to other students. So that's useful. Just getting a buddy. Sometimes just putting it in your calendar is enough accountability that somebody needs. It really depends on the person, but most of us need accountability from, one place or another. And it just, think about what it is that works for you. Do you want a group? Do you want an individual? If you want a group, maybe join an exercise class or start something like instead of a book club, a healthy eating club or a healthy exercising club. If you like working just a one-on-one, then you can get a health coach or a dietitian. You can have a friend, something like that. But then also just think about self-accountability and, like putting it in your calendar or keeping habit trackers.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Jill Weisenberger in regards to her new book, Prediabetes. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Every day, pets are surrendered and abandoned. For these helpless and hurting animals, Paws Humane Society acts as a voice for the voiceless, providing hope for a brighter future. You can make a difference in the life of a shelter pet. Become a humane hero today. Just $10 a month will provide much-needed food, shelter, medical care, and love. It takes a community. It takes heroes like you. Together we can. Together we will. Together we are Paws Humane. Visit pawshumane.org to be a hero in every animal story.
Lindsay Roy's new book, The Gift of Perspective, is a must-read. Lindsay's unique life stories of surviving and thriving after 2 major life challenges is a wonderful companion to start your new year. It's a great guidebook for anyone facing a challenge, big or small, in business or in life. Lindsay's own stories and the anecdotes of those she met along the way help illuminate real ideas in real circumstances, drawing out reflections and actionable takeaways for all. Full of faith, grit, and humor, this book has the power to change how you see things. The Gift of Perspective is available at Amazon or visit Lindsay's website at lindsayroy.com. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Mary Ann. We're here today with special guest Jill Weisenberger, who's here to share with us her new book, Prediabetes. I really love how in your book you talk about wellness visions.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love for you to explain that for our listeners and why we would have those.
I think that this area of prediabetes, a complete guide, is really the main thing that sets this book apart from other books about prediabetes. So not only do I have my background as a registered dietitian nutritionist and as a certified diabetes educator, but I also have a health coaching certification. So it is woven throughout the book. And one of the things that I've learned through my coach training and through the experiences that I've had for 3 decades working one-on-one with people is that when they have a very clear reason to make difficult changes, they're more motivated and more likely to make them. So the wellness vision, I'm going to explain it in just a minute or two, but this is not a minute or two process. This is the kind of thing you need to sit down a few times for 15, 20 minutes, maybe an hour. I often ask people, just get yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and sit and give yourself the luxury of time to work on this. But it's a vision of what your ideal level of health and wellness is. So I'll say, in the future, not terribly far in the future, a few years maybe, in the future, what does your ideal level of health and wellness look like? What are you doing? What are you wearing? What are you saying? What are you eating? What are your habits? Who are you hanging out with? All of those things, just picture that. And it will help you to understand why you want to do what you're doing or why you want to do what's on your goal list. Because without that, if we just say, I need to do it because the doctor said my blood sugar's high, I need to do it because I've got to lose some weight and get into some nicer clothes, whatever, something like that, that's not a big enough why. But if we start to think about what are the things we're going to do and what are our values and what are the emotions. So those are the 3 things I like to see in a wellness vision. Like, what are we doing? I'm eating fruits and vegetables regularly. I'm cooking at home, whatever those habits are. And why am I doing it? Because I want to be able to travel with my husband. I want to be able to take care of my grandkids. I want to be able to go on the church mission. Something like that. And then how do you feel? What are the emotions? I'm proud of myself because I'm doing this. I'm excited that I can keep up with the ladies in the neighborhood doing their walking. I'm actually pleased going to the doctor's office to getting my labs done because I've made such great changes. Something along those lines, but it's your why. Always ask why before how. You need your why before you can decide how you're going to reach your goals.
In your book, you talk about the habit loop, and I'd love for you to share that with our listeners.
Sure. So the habit loop this really comes from the experts, and most of what I've taken for my book, it comes from Charles Duhigg, but also other experts like James Clear and BJ Fogg. All of them have written books about habits, and they're excellent books. And BJ Fogg is a researcher, and the other 2 are journalists, and they've all done excellent books. But the habit loop, this is what I want people to do. First of all, we have habits nonstop all day long. We're doing some sort of a habit. And so it's on autopilot. Habits are really beneficial because they can keep us safe. They can, it's a habit to lock the door when I'm getting ready for bed, or it's a habit to put my seatbelt on when I get in the car. So those kind of habits can keep me safe. They can keep my mind free from having to process and think a lot. Like, imagine if you had to concentrate every time you tied your shoe, like you did when you first learned how to tie a shoe. So while I'm tying my shoe, I can also be thinking about where I'm going to go jogging. So it frees up my mind. But there are also bad habits. But I want people to put emphasis on developing their good habits. So the habit loop has 3 parts. First is the cue or the trigger. So what is it that's going to encourage you to do this new behavior that you want. And then there is the behavior and the reward. So just to give you an example, this one I have done so many times with people over the years. So let's say somebody's trying to start an exercise habit. They want to go for a walk after breakfast, or they want to go for a walk after dinner. Let's just go with walk after dinner. So it's like, how will you know it's walk time? So we'll kind of go through what their routine is like. And it's like, okay, so as you put the leftovers away or put your dishes in the dishwasher, then you know it's time to put your running shoes on or your walking shoes on and go out for a walk. So the cue is putting the leftovers away. The behavior is the walk around the neighborhood, and the reward, you have to give this to yourself, and it has to be immediate. And it has to be emotional. So the reward is going to be something like, look at me, I did it, or go me, whatever. I have, a coaching client now who throws air confetti. So there's all kinds of things, but without all three parts, it's very, very hard to make a reward. Think about getting a reward for maybe eating a candy bar. You don't have to give yourself a high five. Look at me, I ate a candy bar. The reward is built in. It's that amazing taste. But going for a walk or doing strength training or making a salad, something like that, maybe you're not going to have an obvious reward. So you have to come up with your own. And that's what I want people to do with the habit loop. What is the cue? What's the behavior you're going to do? And what is the reward you're going to give yourself?
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. I found that to be so impactful. One of the things I was real impressed with, you talk about fear-based views of food.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love for you to share that and just kind of explain what that is for our listeners.
Yeah, somewhere along the line in the last maybe 15 years or so, maybe longer than that, actually, people think of either food as good or bad. It's either good for you or it's bad for you. There's a lot of fear-based eating decisions, and there's a lot of fear-based food marketing. So, I ask people like, oh, what do you eat? Tell me about your diet. And I'll get this list of, I don't eat sugar. I don't do this. I don't have this ingredient. I don't have that preservative, whatever. And it's like, but nutrition comes from the food that you actually are eating, not from the food you're not eating, So, but what are you eating? Are you eating fruits and vegetables? That type of thing. But I don't really know where it comes from. But for some reason, we want to have a diet enemy, whether it's fat in the 80s and 90s, or carbs more recently, or processed foods very recently. We want to have, it's just human nature, I think, to have a diet enemy. But I don't want people making their food decisions based on the negative. First of all, it's not very much fun. I want people to make their food decisions based on the positive. How does it taste? How nutritious is it? So it definitely makes it more fun, but it also is better nutrition, because I can be vegetarian and eat nothing but junk food. I could go gluten-free and eat poorly. I could be low fat or low carb in my diet, or paleo or Whole30 or whatever, and still just be eating horrible foods. So I want people to focus on what are the nutritious foods, and how does it make them feel after they eat it, and how does it taste, and what kind of rewards do they get from it?
Well, thank you. I can understand that a little bit, because we hear, 1 year coffee's good for you, drink coffee, and the next year coffee's bad, don't drink any. So there's all this mixed messaging going on. And I know they did that recently with chocolate again. Like, oh yes, chocolate's good, eat chocolate. No, don't eat chocolate. It's bad for you now. So
there's a lot of nuance to nutrition that is very hard to get across in a soundbite, or an Instagram post, or a newspaper headline or something like that. And that's really unfortunate, because we're talking to the masses so often. We do have to generalize, but we can generalize so much that we make things nonsensical anymore because it just omits nuance completely.
So, how do we get to this place where we can build a diet, a healthy eating routine? We'll put it that way.
I think that it looks at, what is your diet now and what is your ideal diet? And ideal doesn't mean it's what you're actually going to do, but just think about what is your diet now and what would be ideal and what is the gap. And then I would take one or two things and work on them until they're comfortable. Perfect is the enemy of good enough. Perfect is not really that useful for us, particularly when it comes to health and diet. So start small and be consistent. The small things that you do every single day are so much more important than the bigger things that you do now and then. I mean, I could have a beautiful diet one day a week and a not so great diet the rest of the week, and that's not going to be so great for me, and vice versa. I can have a horrible diet just one day a week and a really good diet the rest of the time. And that's not going to be good for me either. But if I'm just consistent, then I'm going to be able to see progress and I'm going to be able to feel good about myself, which is a big part of making progress. And then I can make more changes and more changes and more changes. So if you're not eating vegetables with every lunch and every dinner, maybe start there. If you're having, a junky snack in the afternoon, maybe pick just that. And instead of chips, have nuts or a piece of fruit or a cup of yogurt or something like that. So again, where are you now? What is ideal? Where are the gaps? And what are teeny tiny things you can do to move forward? The trajectory that we take is way more important than any place that we are on the health journey. So it's moving forward, and consistently moving forward is way more important than being perfect one day and then the next day eating like we might get hit by a bus tomorrow, so I could just eat whatever I want.
And that never works, right?
It does not work. It does not work. It sounds good in the moment because it feels good in the moment, but it does not work.
Well, and I found it interesting. You talked about some research that was done in Finland about adults that had eaten fruits and vegetables. And I was so surprised by that. I thought that was such a phenomenal research done on how they were less likely to develop type 2 diabetes.
Right. So I think that particular research that you're referring to was about berries. It was done in Finland, and it was about berries, and the more berries they ate, the less likely they were to get type 2 diabetes. And we see this with other foods too. We see it with yogurt, tea, coffee. There's a host of foods that we can say appear to be linked to less type 2 diabetes. So when somebody's thinking about, okay, what should I eat? Because I don't want to get type 2 diabetes, I think that's just a great place. We know that these are wholesome foods. We know that nuts are good for us. We know that yogurt is good for us. Berries are good for us. Tea and coffee, I'm a big fan of both of them. They have so many antioxidant type compounds, anti-inflammatory compounds, other things that are bioactive. And they're the most, other than water, they're the most consumed beverages in the world. So I think that we can feel that there's a pretty high safety profile with them, as long as we're being sensible about it. I don't want somebody drinking so much caffeine that they're making themselves sick, or putting in so much cream and sugar that they're, not going to have good health from it. But I think that's a good place to start, is what are the foods that we know are good for us and that I like anyway, and how can I put them in more?
You list just about every eating pattern, or I don't want to say diet, but in many ways, like the Mediterranean diet, DASH diet, that people can look at and learn from to see what they would feel more comfortable with.
Right. There's a lot of healthy ways to the plate, and I think that people want to have something very definitive. I'm going to eat this and I'm not going to eat that. I'm going to follow this diet plan. They want something that's very clear cut, but often the things that are so clear cut like that are very, very strict. And that's why they don't last. So I do think it's a good idea to just look around and what are healthy populations eating and what do you like and what makes you feel good. And those are the foods to be eating. And we know fruits and vegetables and beans and lentils and split peas and things like that around the world are beneficial. We know that fish is good for us. So these are easy places to start. And you don't have to worry about a long list of foods never to eat, or I have to eat this with my breakfast and that with my lunch, and I can never eat this before noon and I can't eat that in the evening. Those kinds of things that drive people crazy. They like them at first and then they're just nutso after a while.
I can understand that. And so I know there's lots of talk about the gut and how the gut's like the second brain. So how does the gut really kind of work with doing, what does it do with diabetes? Does it have anything to do with diabetes?
We think that it does. This is an area of research that's really just emerging, and there's so much more that we're going to learn. But I'll give you just one example of something that seems to be relevant. So earlier I said something about getting the right types of fibers to help your gut, the good, healthy gut bacteria to thrive. So there are these bacteria in our gut that basically make a meal out of some of the fibers that we consume. So fibers and resistant starches don't get digested by us. So instead of turning into glucose and blood sugar and being absorbed in the small intestine, they go all the way to the large intestine. And then these bacteria make a meal out of it. And in the process of this, they are producing compounds called short chain fatty acids. Maybe some people have heard of that. Butyrate is one of them. That may be a buzzword for some people. So these bacteria produce this compound. This compound butyrate seems to be very important for insulin sensitivity. And it's also, we know, very important as an energy source for the colon cells, the cells of the colon wall. And so that seems to be protective against colon cancer as well. But speaking strictly about diabetes, that compound that is produced, or that group of compounds that's produced, does appear to be beneficial for insulin resistance, to make us more insulin sensitive or less resistant.
Are there diets also that are out there, or eating habits that also, let's say, assist with longevity?
Yes, for the most part, the same things that I already talked about have to do with longevity. But one food comes up often in various studies, in the DASH study, in the Mediterranean style diet, that's pulses. So that's beans and lentils and peas. And I remember there's one study that looked at 4 different countries. I think one was Australia, one was Japan. I don't remember the other 2, but they're quite diverse. It was 4 countries. And when researchers looked at the foods that were most associated with longevity, it was pulses, so beans and lentils. So I'm a big fan of those. It also has the right types of fiber for what I was just talking about for the gut microbiome. And I think sometimes people say, oh, no, that's carbohydrate. That's bad. How could that be good? But they're missing the picture. Remember in the very beginning, I said prediabetes and type 2 diabetes are more than just a blood sugar problem. So we might be able to lower the blood sugar by getting rid of all the carbohydrates, but that doesn't really fix the insulin resistance problem.
If someone's overweight, is that kind of a guarantee for prediabetes?
No, weight is not something that you can look at and predict this person will have prediabetes or diabetes and this person won't. There are many, many people who, by definition, have obesity or overweight and have normal blood sugar levels. Likewise, there are many people who are very, very slim, normal weight and extra slim, and they do have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. So it's much more than just an issue about weight. However, if the weight is elevated and the weight comes down, we typically do see an improvement in blood sugars. But that doesn't mean that somebody at a certain weight definitely has high blood sugar, or at a very low weight does not have high blood sugar.
Now, does weight, I often hear people talk about weight has to do with insulin resistance as well. Is there a correlation with that?
Yes. So excess weight often is the reason for insulin resistance. But again, you just can't look at somebody and say, oh, prediabetes, diabetes, not. It doesn't work like that. But yes, excess weight is a major factor for insulin resistance.
Do we have to be really kind of counting calories as we go throughout our day and being aware of where our calories are coming from?
Okay, so counting calories and being calorie aware are different things. I do think that for anybody who's trying to lose weight or gain weight, or even if they struggle to maintain their weight, we really do want to be calorie aware. Some people are going to benefit from calorie counting. Other people are going to lose their minds over it. And I think either way is fine. Do it or don't. But I wouldn't want anybody to do it long term, because if we do it long term, then we really have gotten obsessed. But it is kind of interesting to do it for several days or up to a couple of weeks, so you can really learn a lot. But everybody should be anybody who's trying to manage their weight should be calorie aware. So, by that, I mean, like, have a rough idea of what your daily calories intake is, or what your goal is, and then how do various foods fit in there. What are the foods that are very high in calories and the foods that are very low in calories. I would want you to know that a cup of pasta is a couple hundred calories, but a cup of broccoli is 50. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have pasta, and it doesn't mean you have to eat broccoli, but it does mean that you probably want to eat more broccoli than pasta if you're trying to keep your weight down. That's what that means. So that's what I mean by calorie aware.
Instead of eating French fries, maybe some celery.
Yes, but I don't know if that's going to make people happy switching from some French fries to celery. But maybe what they could do is have 10 French fries and a salad instead of 20 French fries and no salad.
It's that moderation piece.
Yeah, that's not really too exciting to talk about, but it is really important. It is so important. I wish I knew how to make that a fun topic.
Well, and I think if we look at it as in, we're able to still have a little bit of something, but looking forward to eating things that serve our body, that does make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we really want to ask ourselves, what do we enjoy? How does it make me feel? Is it convenient? You want to be able to answer all those questions and not just look at a list and say, this is what I have to eat and this is what I can't eat.
So as someone's starting to go through the grocery store, I know that can be feeling like a minefield sometimes, just try to identify what's actually food and what's not, or what's healthy and what's not. What are some tips that our listeners can take to start making changes in their diet for something that really serves them?
Wow, that is a big, big topic. I think we could talk an hour on that. In fact, I love going to the grocery store with people and showing them things. But we absolutely have to read food labels. And I think the first place to look is the serving size, because if it says 10 chips or a half a cup or 8 crackers or whatever it is, all the numbers relate to that. So if you eat more, you're getting more calories, more carbohydrate, more sodium, and more fiber. And if you eat less, then you're getting less of every nutrient. So we have to start there, I think. But the other thing to really consider is that the nutrition facts panel, that's the fine print of your contract. That's really regulated by law very, very carefully. But the things on the front of the package that say things like made with whole grains or lower in fat, something like that, or 6 grams of protein or 4 grams of protein. Those things that they're calling out for marketing aren't necessarily things that are relevant to us. And they're also misleading sometimes. So if you saw something on a label that said 4 grams of protein, you might think 4 grams was a lot, but it's not. It's not very much at all. 3 ounces of chicken breast is 21. So 4 grams of protein is not really very much at all. Or if you see on the front of the label where it says made with whole grains, this does not tell you that it's mostly whole grains. This could be white bread with a pinch of whole grain added, or it could be, I saw the Ritz crackers like that says made with whole grains, and it was very, very little whole grain compared to how much white flour it was. So those are the things I want to just maybe ignore them and just go straight to the nutrition facts panel.
So how important is sleep? Is it as important as eating healthy?
I think that it probably is. It's kind of hard to say, what's the most important: sleep, diet, exercise. I think they're all just those pillars of lifestyle that, it's just like a 3-legged stool. You need all 3. And of course, there's, stress management and all the other things that we could be looking at. But I think those 3 probably are the main pillars. And what we know from research is that when we are sleep deprived, we are more insulin resistant. And it's even from a single night of poor sleep, you are more insulin resistant the next day. And if you get poor sleep on a regular basis, you're more insulin resistant on a regular basis. So this is a problem. So getting a good night's sleep is pretty important. But even aside from that, just think about this. If you're not sleeping well and you're tired, it's a little harder to make good decisions. When we're really tired, that's when we have our worst judgment and more likely to reach into the cracker box a second or third time. And we also have some research that shows that when people sleep poorly, they're more apt to be hungrier and eat more, particularly the kind of foods that we think of as like unhealthy snacks, like chips and crackers, things like that. So there's lots of reasons to sleep well. Besides, it just feels better, makes life easier.
So it's real important to set up a routine and have that down as well as we would eating healthy and choosing a healthy diet.
I think it's just as important. But I think that when we're looking at, a lifestyle reset, that we can prioritize what we want to work on, first, second, and third. So we don't have to work on everything that's important all at the same time. So like I said before, the trajectory, the moving forward is way more important than any particular place that you land, on your health journey.
How about when it's just tough for people to make changes? How do they try to change their behavior, or where do they find that motivation?
Well, that's why I like the wellness vision, because that really helps people tap into motivation. That's one thing that's really important. The other thing that's really important is being successful. We are more motivated to do something when we are good at it, when we're doing well at it. So I think that we need to make the goals teeny tiny. So if we're really struggling, make them as tiny as possible. So often I'll have people who aren't used to exercise saying, well, I'm going to walk 30 minutes 4 times this week. That's a great goal, but it may not be the best goal for them. It might be better to do 5 minutes of walking every day, because 5 minutes is really, really doable. And by doing it every day, you're setting up that habit, that routine that can become a habit. So I think that might be a much better goal. So if you are struggling, then tap into your motivation by thinking about what is your why. Remember what I said, that why should include what it is that you want, what you want to be doing, how you want to feel, what are the emotions, and what are the reasons that you want something. It's because of, you want to feel energetic, you want to travel, you want to take care of children or whatever. but know your why. And then just make it teeny, teeny, tiny until you know you can be successful, and just check off all that. Walk 5 minutes, walk 5 minutes today, walk 5 minutes today, walk 5 minutes today. And that feels pretty good by the end of the week. It's like, okay, I can do that again. I think that's the best way.
I love that. I think that's so empowering. Well, Jill, I know you've got some great information on your website, recipes, and things like that. Can you
Yes.
share your website with us?
Sure. So as long as you can spell my name, you can find me. It's jillweisenberger.com. And if anybody is interested, I have a prediabetes checklist that people can download for free. Yep, they can find me, jillweisenberger.com. And then also on social media, I'm Nutrition Jill.
Well, Jill, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
I had a great time. I love talking about this topic. So thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity just to go on and on about one of my favorite things.
Well, thank you, Jill. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Prediabetes. Prediabetes is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.